Halloween is a night rich with illusion, where shadows move strangely and costumes blur the line between reality and imagination. But in 2012, in the chill of an autumn evening, that illusion turned deadly for one child in Pennsylvania. A 9-year-old had donned a Halloween outfit that evening, black clothing paired with a hat adorned by a white tassel. Perhaps whimsical, perhaps homemade. It was a simple costume, but in the dimming light, it cast a misunderstood silhouette. As the child played outside, his movements caught the attention of a relative, a man armed with a shotgun. The man later claimed he thought he was aiming at a skunk, a nuisance, a pest, something worth shooting. He fired. Only after the shot echoed did he realize his mistake. The skunk was his young relative. The child was rushed to the hospital with critical injuries and miraculously survived, but the trauma lingered, not just in flesh, but in the minds of all who heard the story. Local reports confirmed that alcohol was involved and charges were filed. I am Michelle,
And I am Isaiah.
and we would like to welcome you to Shifting Veil's month of haunted headlines, blood-stained whispers, and the kind of stories that nestle beneath your skin. Halloween is coming. But before the costumes and candy, we're peeling back the veil on something far more chilling, the true tales that inspire the fear.
Every week leading up to All Hallows Eve, we'll bring you episodes steeped in eerie atmosphere and unsettling truth. From unsolved disappearances and death masked as decor, to cult prophecies and candy-laced betrayal. These aren't ghost stories, they're real, and they've left echoes long after the last jack-o'-lantern's grin has faded. So turn down the lights, lock your doors, and press play. The veil is thinning, and your descent into October's shadows starts now.
Halloween Day 1955 dawned crisp and bright over Long Island. As children prepared their costumes and neighborhoods readied for a night of harmless mischief and sugar-fueled excitement, a young mother named Marilyn Dahman headed out to the Food Fair supermarket in East Meadow, Nassau County, for what should have been a simple shopping trip. With her were her two children, Craig, a curious, wide-eyed toddler, just 2 years old, and his infant sister, Pamela, only 7 months old. The outing was routine, uneventful, until it wasn't. At approximately 11:30 a.m., Marilyn parked outside the store and, believing her errand would only take a few minutes, made a fateful choice. She left Stephen and Pamela outside, entrusting her son with the gentle instruction, "Be good and watch your little sister." The baby was nestled in her stroller. Stephen stood beside her, protective and obedient. 10 minutes passed. Marilyn emerged with her groceries and into a waking nightmare. The stroller was gone. Her children were missing. In a panic, she searched the surrounding area, calling their names and racing from door to door. But it wasn't until some distance away that Pamela's stroller was discovered, abandoned and eerily intact. Pamela lay inside, unharmed. Stephen, however, had vanished. There was no ransom note, no witnesses who could offer a reliable account, no clear signs of struggle. Long Island police launched a massive investigation aided by the FBI. Helicopters combed the skies, bloodhounds swept the area, photos of Stephen circulated nationwide. But despite the frantic efforts, no trace of the boy was ever found. It was as if he'd been swallowed by the very air. Years later, faint ripples of hope would surface, tips from psychics, sightings across the country, and even a man in Michigan who briefly believed he might be Stephen. But DNA tests ruled them out. The disappearance of Stephen Dahman became one of Long Island's most haunting mysteries, a case that chills even decades later. The shadow of that Halloween morning still lingers. Okay, first of all, no. Why are we leaving our children? How old was Stephen? He was a toddler. He was 2 years old.
Yeah, that doesn't
I
sit
don't
right.
I don't care about it being a different time. What year was that? 1955? No, lady, we don't. We don't leave. No, he's a baby. Two
Right,
years
yeah.
old. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sit right at all.
Wow. And she had to live with that for the rest of her life. That's wild. Yeah. Mm-mm.
In the shadowy pulse of Halloween night, mischief blends easily with menace. While egg throwing may seem like a juvenile prank, more sticky than sinister, there are moments when such antics cross into tragedy. The case of Carl Jackson is one such moment, a grim reminder that even the most trivial acts can be fatal when darkness converges with impulse. It was October 31st, 1995, and 21-year-old Carl Jackson was doing something he rarely did, stepping outside on Halloween. A cautious man by nature, he believed the night carried danger, not ghosts or goblins, but real harm. Jackson worked as a data entry clerk at Morgan Stanley in Manhattan. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't superstitious. He was wary. But that evening, he decided to venture into the Bronx to pick up his girlfriend's son from a Halloween party. As he drove through the neighborhood, his worst fear materialized in the most mundane form. A group of teenagers hurled eggs at his car. Carl pulled over. Maybe it was a reflex. Maybe it was frustration. He got out of the vehicle, exchanged words, but before he could fully climb back into his car, one of the teens brandished a gun and fired. A single shot to the head. Carl Jackson died instantly. The
Dang.
shooter, just 17, was arrested and charged, but the shockwaves of Jackson's death rippled far beyond the courtroom. Here was a man who had sensed the danger of the holiday, who had tried to avoid it, and yet walked straight into the heart of its darkness.
How ironic. That's
Yeah,
that's horrible, really.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah. 3 years later, in 1998, the horror repeated itself. Another Bronx man, similarly out with his girlfriend to pick up her son from a Halloween party, was targeted by egg wielding teenagers. The details echoed Jackson's fate: an argument, a return to the car, a fatal gunshot. The parallels were chilling. These incidents tore holes in the veil of seasonal playfulness. They revealed a cruel truth. Sometimes the costumes aren't the scariest part of Halloween. Sometimes it's the unpredictability of real people, armed with real weapons, reacting to real emotions in a moment that spirals beyond control. Carl Jackson never lived to see his fears validated, but his story remains etched in the cautionary tales of Halloween. A man who sensed the danger before the mask was lifted, and once it was far too late.
In the small town of Frederica, Delaware, Halloween morning arrived with its usual hints of mischief. Cool air, carved pumpkins glowing dimly from front porches, and plastic skeletons swaying gently from trees. The streets bore the cheerful menace of the season, the veil between the whimsical and the ghastly filling thin. And then there was the body hanging from a tree off South Market Street, framed by the rising sun and the murky silhouette of bare branches, was a figure so eerily positioned that passers-by mistook it for an elaborate Halloween prop. The woman's form dangled motionless, clothes blending with the seasonal scenery, the pose unnervingly theatrical. Commuters, children, and even neighbors walked past, admiring the lifelike detail. Some believed it was the work of a dedicated prankster, a macabre tribute to the holiday spirit. But unlike the rubber corpses and paper ghosts scattered across lawns, this display didn't blink. It didn't sway with a playful wind. It was real. Hours passed before someone grew suspicious enough to alert authorities. By then, dozens, perhaps more, had walked by, unaware that what they were looking at wasn't a prop, but a person. When police arrived, the grim truth unraveled. The body was that of a 42-year-old woman who had died by suicide sometime the night before. The scene, horrifyingly in its quiet loneliness, took place under cover of darkness, her final act blending seamlessly into the very rituals meant to mock death. The tragedy drew national attention, not for its brutality, but for its bizarre timing. How easily horror was dressed as humor. How long it went unnoticed. The woman's identity was not immediately released. out of respect for the family, but officials confirmed her death was not the result of foul play. And so, Frederica's Halloween in 2005, the real horror wasn't in masks or make believe, but in the silence that settled around a soul lost in plain sight.
I remember seeing that on the news.
That's always a fear that, like, much like Carl Jackson, that's something that is always worrisome around the time, because there was a time when people were using real bones for skeletons as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And though some people that used real bones for skeletons out for props may have gotten those bones through legitimate ways, there are people out there that may not have done the same thing.
Oh, I know they definitely don't get them legitimately all the time. Um, yeah, people do crazy things. Um, Going to cemeteries and getting things that they shouldn't be messing with.
Right.
I know a story of somebody that had gone to a cemetery. I'm not going to say the state because I know I have a listener that's going to know exactly who I'm talking about. But they had gone to a cemetery and there was a it was an above ground uh, concrete whatever they're called. I don't know what it's called. And it was busted open, and they took some of these bones home with them and regretted it shortly after because they took them home, put them in a little Ziploc baggie, and put them in a kitchen drawer. It was just something spooky. I don't know why. They just did it. They weren't really going to do anything with them. And they started hearing rustling in the drawer. The drawer would open, things started happening within the home, and it was decided upon that those bones needed to go exactly where they had retrieved them. And once they took them back, those things that were happening within the home suddenly stopped happening. But yeah, that's just like a little side story. But yeah, people, if you find bones, just just leave them and don't go digging them up on purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Halloween is a night built on illusion, a celebration of the absurd, the grotesque, and the mischievous, cloaked in costumes and masks. But for two men on two separate nights, the line between fantasy and fury blurred catastrophically. It was Halloween night in 2011, and the streets of Chicago pulsed with the usual electricity. Costumed children roamed sidewalks with plastic pumpkins in hand. Porch lights flickered behind paper ghosts, and candy flowed from bowls like treasure. But for one 55-year-old man, the night soured quickly. When he discovered his candy bag was missing, a suspicion turned into rage. He blamed his neighbor, a woman he'd known, and confronted her in what might have started as a quarrel, but something in him snapped. The man returned armed with multiple steak knives, unleashing a brutal attack that ended her life. A petty theft, or perhaps a misunderstanding, had escalated into an act of unthinkable violence. Candy may be the currency of Halloween joy, but here it became a blood-soaked symbol of obsession and control. The following year, in 2012, horror again crawled out of the shadows, this time in New York, in the pale hours of All Saints' Day. A Marine dressed in a bright tutu, perhaps drunk, perhaps caught in a haze of bravado and misplaced honor, spotted a man in a military-style uniform seated in a wheelchair. Viewing the sight through the warped lens of Halloween mockery, the Marine grew incensed. To him it was a cruel joke, a stain on sacred service. He attacked the man, fists flying, fury exploding. But the man was not mocking anything. He was a disabled veteran, and his uniform wasn't a costume. It was the embodiment of sacrifice. The truth emerged only after the attack once police stepped in. The Marine, now arrested and facing charges, saw the bitter irony. In defending perceived honor, he had desecrated it himself. 2 years, two Halloween tragedies, each tied to instinct, assumption, and rage, each born from a night meant to entertain, ending instead in violence and grief. And so the warning whispers each October. Not everyone is wearing a costume, and not every scream is pretend.
You've just crossed another tale off October's list of haunted truths. But the shadows don't stop here. If tonight's story left you looking over your shoulder or digging deeper into the darker corners of Halloween, make sure to like, follow, and share this episode with anyone brave enough to join you.
Because we're just getting started. New horrors await next week, and some masks are harder to remove than others. Until then, lock the doors, check the candy, and don't trust the quiet.